Welcome back to the Shoot Podcast, the only podcast hosted by me. Busy day in the NBA tomorrow, opening day. We're going to talk about extensions. We're going to talk about expectations for opening day games. It's going to be a good episode. Let's get into it. All right, extension season is here in the NBA. Lots of rookie extensions being given out. But before we talk about the rookie extensions, we have to talk about Houston Rockets star Kevin Durant has agreed to a 2-year, $90 million extension with the Houston Rockets, of course. Not a surprise, perhaps. Some may have expected it to come later. I wasn't honestly expecting it to come this early, but I was expecting the extension nonetheless. 2-year, 90, pretty good value deal, especially for Kevin Durant. Obviously, he's old, but he fits incredibly with this team, and they're going to need a lot of Kevin Durant this season to mitigate some of the weaknesses they had last season in terms of on-ball creation. And certainly you may worry about an aging superstar. This would take him 2 years out after this year, so he's currently on a 3-year contract. Where is Kevin Durant after this contract? Is he on the team still? None of this really matters to the Houston Rockets. They are in a win now mode. They have lots of young talent. They have obviously a pretty solid supporting cast of older role players and Kevin Durant. So they're going to make a run this year regardless of missing out on Fred VanVleet or not. And there's lots of good things to say about Fred VanVleet, and especially his role within this Rockets team as a leader, as a ball tempo pusher on this team, being able to sort of navigate situations that their younger guards may not be able to navigate on ball. However, of course, there has to be a mention of last year's draft pick. I'm pretty sure he was 3. Did he go 3? Reed Sheppard, who barely played in his rookie year, didn't look great in either summer league, shot the ball, didn't shoot it well. However, in preseason, since the news of Fred VanVleet being out, has been pretty solid. He had a really quite impressive scoring night the other day. I'm not sure against who, but he was shooting, and he was shooting it well, which is what you wanted of him. You have to wonder if he's going to be able to continuously play on ball, especially because we're not too sure about Amen Thompson's use as a first guy on the ball per possession player. And of course, their other point guards on the roster would be Aaron Holiday. And I'm a big Aaron Holiday fan. He was on the Pacers a few years ago. I had high hopes for him. He unfortunately just didn't work out. They ended up getting TJ McConnell to replace him. And since leaving Indiana, he's been up and down, but he's had some good years. He's always been a good shooter. On-ball juice, I don't know if it's there enough to be a point guard for a team that is trying to win a lot of games. But the Houston Rockets giving a sign of good faith to Kevin Durant, and he is reciprocating by taking a lot less than the max extension of $120 over 2 years, sacrificing about $30 million. Gives them some flexibility so they're not absolutely back to the wall against the tax aprons. Overall, there's not really much else to say other than it's a pretty solid contract for one of the best players ever. He's going to revolutionize this offense in a way that he's done before with the Warriors, taking them to another level. And of course, how important he was on the Thunder and the Nets. He's always been unguardable in a certain way, but in his old age, he's lost a step athletically from his injuries. He's more of a shooter than an on-ball guy permanently, if you know what I mean. Anyways, next up, I think both the Portland guys were signed right next to each other, and on incredible deals at that. Toumani Camara, 4-year, $82 million, about $20.5 million per year, which is incredible value for a guy that I don't know if he had first team, but he definitely had a case for first team all defense last year. Obviously, his sample size is small, and that's why I think a guy like Keegan Murray got a lot more money. Even though Camara might be more valuable in a vacuum last season, to compare the numbers, you're getting an all-defensive guy who's not quite the offensive guy, but he is all defensive, and $20.5 million is probably going to be the going rate for a talented forward that plays on both ends of the floor. What really surprised me was the Shaedon Sharpe extension, not because of the number, but because I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. 4 years, 90, 22.5 a year is not horrible value. And obviously he's a really good scorer at times. It just seems that he forgets sometimes that he's the most athletic player on the entire team, and oftentimes on the entire court. And he just settles sometimes, and defensively he has the tools to be a lot better than he is. And he kind of has a similar thing to Ben Mathurin, although to a lesser extent, playmaking wise. I'm fairly confident in saying that Shaedon Sharpe is a better playmaker than Bennedict Mathurin, who isn't getting an extension this year, and probably it's just because the Pacers have a lot of money on the books, and they would rather see what he can be and maybe see what his value is before giving him a contract. But Shaedon Sharpe, as an offensive player, is about as physically gifted as you can be, but on a team, in a team setting, it hasn't always looked quite how it should. And we've seen this with Chauncey benching him early in the season. Well, sometime during the season, because he just wasn't giving enough defensively. And we gotta hope that changes. Obviously, we want Shaedon Sharpe to be good. He's a highlight machine. He is one of the best verts in the entire league, in the entire history of the league even. But I am very excited to see both the Blazers wings getting big money. And I'm excited to see their team this year, because their depth is pretty immense right now. And if they're going to get anything out of Young Hansen, it's going to be a fun season regardless. But if they're getting stuff out of Young Hansen, it's going to be definitely a team to watch. We see Denny got a lot better last season. We see Klingon hopefully being able to play 28 even minutes per game. In a high-octane offense, it's hard to see him playing more than 30, just because he has such a responsibility on the defensive end that nobody else on the team has. And he's got to do that And then he's also got to run the furthest on the court because he's always going to be in the paint. And like a young Rudy Gobert, it's hard to play in pace with a big, slower center who's a defensive force. It just doesn't always work. However, in those 24 to 28 minutes we're going to see Clingan in, I think he's going to be really good. He very nearly could have made all defensive last year had he played more. I think numbers-wise, he's one of the best rim protectors in the league already. And beyond that, we saw in college what he can do. He won the national championship at UConn, beating Zach Edey, who may have popped more in his rookie year, but maybe less of a defensive force for sure, and potentially limited offensively because of his size. But overall, you think of a lineup with Scoot, Sharp, Kamara, Denny, and Clingan. And if Scoot's not playing well, then Drew Holiday can be in there and he'll move the ball well and hopefully shoot at a decent clip. And then also Jeremy Grant on the bench and perhaps some Robert Williams. I don't know if he's ever going to play basketball again. And Young Hansen, who I think actually will play this year. It's going to be a fun team at the very least, a deep team at the absolute least. And I can't see a world where they're any worse than they were last year. And obviously the two wings that they extended were a big part of that, and to get them on borderline bargain bin deals, especially on Kamara, I love that contract. I am very excited to see what they can do in the next year and which teams they'll be better than. And up next, we're going to pivot to Christian Braun. Now, Christian Braun had sort of an insane, I would even go as far to say, season last year, getting a lot of minutes with the departure of KCP and the departure before that of Bruce Brown a couple of years prior. He's just gotten better every year. He shot an insane percentage from the field last year, and obviously you could say that that is a product of playing with Jokic. I would say it's a product of playing with Jokic and being very talented. He was a Kansas player in college, much like Kelly Oubre, and we see his growth in the NBA similar to the growth of Christian Braun. But I think Christian Braun has a better head on his shoulders for the game, a little more limited maybe, but plays the game a little more safe. Doesn't take these risky shots. Sorry for the unnecessary shots at Kelly Oubre, but he was just the first Kansas guy I could think of. But yes, Christian Braun doubling his points per game almost every season, from 4.7 to 7.3, then from 7.3 to 15.4. 58% from the field. Like, he had a very, very real shot at winning Most Improved Player this year. And unfortunately he didn't, but he had one of the best cases in the league. He moves the ball well. I feel like there's so many teams that could benefit from a guy like Christian Braun that just don't have one. Like, think certainly similarly skilled guys in the league. Like, I want to say a Nesmith, but he doesn't move the ball as much, but he does the other things similarly. And we see how valuable he can be in the playoffs. Now, Christian Braun's a little bit older. He did come in at 21. He played a couple of years in college. And he came in. he played a lot in his rookie year, and I think whenever you get a guy like that, you know the coach trusts him, and you know that he's working hard, and the coach likes what he's seeing on the court. So the growth of Christian Braun is very, very promising. I don't think there's a path to scaling up much more than he is right now. He played 34 minutes per game last year, which is kind of absurd. But they needed him. Depth-wise, they have more depth this year, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets less time. I wouldn't be surprised if his numbers go down a little bit. And I don't think that would be a sign of regression on the part of Christian Braun. I think it would be a sign of the Denver Nuggets being a more team-oriented game rather than a starting lineup that is very talented and then a bench that is less than ideal for a team that has such a starting lineup. And we see situations like this all the time where a guy will have a good season and get paid a lot of money and isn't quite as good the next season, and then you're like, maybe that contract was an overpay, but it's $25 million a year, and you can afford to give him that money once you get off of the MPJ money like they did. And you're making a bet on his hyper efficient play of last year, which he's just such an active off-ball player. It's hard to believe that his efficiency won't be there. I mean, he shot 65% on twos, which is kind of unbelievable for a guy that just the previous year was shooting 49.8%. And it was no small sample size, so you just gotta hope that he's still good. He's not an outlier season there, and that he's gonna keep it up. Because outside of him, the Nuggets have gotten a lot better. They got off, obviously, the MPJ money, which allowed them to make this signing, and they got Cam Johnson in return for it, who is easily the most palatable player to put next to Jokic. He fits in like a glove. It's not even a question if he's going to fit in. The big question with Cam Johnson is if he's going to be able to stay healthy for a long portion of the season. He's never played more than 66 games in a season, and he's only played more than 60 once. And obviously, a huge jump in points year over year last season, and relatively similar efficiency. So obviously, as a shooter, he's fairly scalable, and it's easy to see where he'll fit in and how easy of shots he'll get playing next to Jokic, who requires so much attention, and then complementing that with the cutting ability of course, Christian Braun and Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon also needs to be healthy this year. And the dangerous off-the-dribble game of Jamal Murray. It's easy to see how open Cam Johnson's going to be, and it's easy to see how open Christian Braun is going to be. So this team's starting lineup, rock solid. Bench-wise, they picked up Bruce Brown again. I'm excited to see him shoot 50% from one corner and 28% from the other corner, like he did last time in Denver. And they also have Valanciunas, who they got for Dario Saric, which has to be the absolute steal of a trade, considering how useless, well, that's a little harsh, but how ineffective Dario Saric was last season for a team that needed a backup center and just couldn't find it. And also DaRon Holmes, who I was a big fan of in the draft last year. I thought he could have really helped a number of teams and I wasn't surprised that the Nuggets went out and got him. I think Zeke Naji is still on this roster, but anytime that Zeke Naji could be on the floor, I think that Deron Holmes could just be a better option halfway through the season. So excited to see him play as well. And after that, we've got Dyson Daniels. Not a surprise. Same exact AAV for Dyson Daniels as Christian Braun. And although on paper Dyson Daniels is probably better, I would say considerably better defensively, a better on-ball player, and close to being a good shooter. His sample size is much smaller than Christian Braun's. Growth, similar, but the sample size of Dyson Daniels being a very talented player is much smaller than the sample size of Christian Braun. And the fit in Atlanta is a little bit more questionable than the fit for Christian Braun. But, of course, Dyson Daniels is about a full year younger, if not more. So I think that kind of fills in the gap in terms of talent versus upside. And obviously there is some upside to be gained from Dyson Daniels still, only in year 3. Another guy that I thought could be good in the draft and was a little disappointed early on. The shot just was not falling. As he said, there must be something in the water in Louisiana that the Pelicans just cannot stay healthy. He was hurt on and off. And then we see, given the opportunity, he led the league in steals out of nowhere. He started scoring at a much better rate. His 2-point percentage up, his 3-point percentage up. One of the weirdest parts of Dyson Daniels' game, and part of the reason that his 3-point shooting upside is a little iffy, is that free throw shooting. He shot sub 60% last year after being 65 and 64 the 2 years before that. Very low volume. He's not even shooting 2 a game, so it's hard to really judge him on that. But it's clear that his impact on the court defensively outweighs a lot of the negatives offensively that might appear. And playing alongside shooters like Trey and Rizachet and now Kristaps is going to allow him even more space, both on the 3-point line and attacking from the catch on the 3-point line. And it's easy to project Dyson Daniels as a really solid connector, is what I'm going for in Atlanta. Connecting between the guards and the bigs, both off-ball moving offensively and defensively, filling in gaps that some of the other guys might lack, especially Trey in size and strength. So I think it's very clear what their goal is with this team, and it's put a bunch of defenders next to Trey and $25 million a year for a guy who almost won Defensive Player of the Year as a guard. Seems like a steal. You obviously have to hope that his offensive game catches up, but even if it doesn't, 25 a year is not an immovable contract. And defensively, like, there's no question his defense is worth $20 million, if not more. So the offense is just the cherry on top. All right, NBA games resume tonight. Rockets take on the Thunder, and then after that, we have Warriors taking on the Lakers. And unfortunately, there's no LeBron, and of course, Luka will be playing his first game post press tour summer, where he was in shape and on Men's Health and playing Euroball and impressing everyone and doing all the right things and saying everything right, but we get to see it in action. But before we continue with Warriors Lakers, let's talk about the Thunder and Rockets game. While I am, of course, excited for this game, it says it's going to start at 6:30, and I can only assume that it won't start until 6:50 because of the ring ceremony. But that being said, it's a cool ceremony, and I'm glad that they take the time to do it on the first game of the season. We'll get to see Shea, of course, back in action. MVP, reigning MVP. So what am I expecting? What am I expecting out of this game? I would say I'm expecting a big game from Shea. I'm expecting the Thunder to come out with a lot of energy, fired up, Shea ready to protect his MVP, defend his MVP, and the rest of the Thunder being ready to protect and defend against their championship. Obviously, the Thunder have a lot of talent, and it remains to be seen what exactly their lineups are going to be like. We assume they're going to be pretty similar, although they do have Topic coming back, and of course they have the double big lineup that they can run. So it'll be an interesting first game for them, although not as interesting as I think for many other teams that have tried to either better or worsen their rosters for various reasons, such as the Houston Rockets, who I can only assume are going to be better this year than last year, which is saying a lot, because they were quite good last year. Obviously, adding Kevin Durant is going to put on a show, I think, for this game. He obviously has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder going against the Thunder, watching them put up their banner and get their rings. But more importantly, I think he wants to prove that he can fit in and show out within this roster without demanding the ball. Obviously, there's going to be questions about point guards. I talked about it earlier, but I think Amen Thompson and Reed Sheppard will be enough, at least for a while. And to a lesser extent, Aaron Holiday, who I am a fan of, but I don't know quite what he will bring to the table as a point guard. So what am I expecting out of the Rockets? Like I said, KD, chip on his shoulder, maybe having a good game, showing out in his role, which is supreme play finisher. I am interested to see the lineups they run, because obviously with Fred's injury, their depth is a little more scarce than you would have previously thought, because you were like, oh, well, they have Fred, they have Reed, they have Aaron Holiday, and then Amen Thompson can also run point guard from time to time. But then once Fred goes down, then you're like, we have Amen Thompson and we have Reed Sheppard, but we don't have the veteran point guard that's steady. And in fact, most of our depth is wings, some forwards. So it will be an interesting early season for them, trying to figure out a couple lineups. And I think Ime Udoka is definitely equipped to experiment. He's had big rosters in the past. He did very well with some Celtics rosters that were pretty big. So I can only assume that he's going to figure things out. But early season, like I said, it's going to be pretty fun. You wonder how much Tari's going to play. You wonder how much Jabari's going to play. If their bigs are kind of a strange group, as in you can play a few of them together, but certain matchups you might not want to. How good Şengün is going to be with these lineups versus the more typical bigs. in Adams and Capella. I wonder if their wing depth is going to be enough, not in the forwards. But I think a lot of Amen Thompson is going to curb any wing depth issues that aren't big wings at the very least. So yeah, I expect the Thunder to come out with a lot of energy, and I expect the Rockets to show off what they are. Whether it's experimenting with big lineups, whether it's playing some younger guards at a point guard, see what Reed Sheppard has. But I'm expecting them to run a bunch of different stuff and rely on the huge play finisher that is KD. And moving on to Warriors-Lakers. Warriors-Lakers, in a certain way, is not as interesting as a game other than Luka, because obviously the Warriors are fairly similar to last year, which was a good team post All-Star, post Jimmy trade, I should say. Adding Al Horford is definitely something that is going to make them better, whether he can play between 18 and 20 minutes, or maybe he gets 24 to 28 occasionally. Either way, he does similar things to Draymond, albeit he is older and somehow still a good defender, but older and bigger and probably slower. He is a very solid passer. I've seen some plays they run where they would usually have Draymond in a spot. They would put Al Horford in there instead. He's not quite as big as you might want out of a guy, but they lost Kevon Looney. They don't really have a big guy. They don't usually need to run a big guy with this lineup. It's all about alleviating some of that stress of putting Draymond at the 5, because he's good as a 5, but he's not so good as a 5 for 30 minutes a night. He's much better as a 4 for a majority of the night. And obviously Quentin Post is going to play. To what extent he plays, I'm not sure. With their big man lineup, Trayce Jackson-Davis still on the team. So if you're looking at Al Horford, Draymond, then you have Quentin Post and Trayce Jackson-Davis. You got a lot of options there, and I know Trayce wasn't that good last year. He's still a serviceable NBA player, and he knows how to play basketball. So I assume he'll get spot minutes occasionally. So I expect some clarity on their big man rotation. That's one thing I would expect. Obviously, we're going to have Steph Curry, and we're going to have Jimmy Butler, and we're going to have Draymond. I assume Al Horford will start, and maybe Podziemski will start. I'm not sure. You might like him on the bench. Buddy Hield's still on this team. You might like him as a starter. You might like a Moses Moody as a starter, just to add some defensive size on the wing, or perhaps even Kuminga. And I'm surprised I got this far in without talking about Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga is likely going to come off the bench. It's hard to imagine a scenario where he starts. And Steve Kerr has previously said he doesn't like playing Kuminga, whether it be because he doesn't play quite the way they want or his effort is inconsistent. It doesn't matter. He doesn't like playing him. We saw in the playoffs, I believe against the Rockets when Steph Curry got hurt, that Kuminga can win a game in the playoffs. Well, I don't know if they won, but he can put up 30 in a game in the playoffs. But he just does not fit alongside Steph Curry. And I think to an even lesser extent besides Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, because Jimmy doesn't shoot the ball very well from 3 either. In fact, last year, Jimmy Butler wasn't even that good of a mid-range shooter. So you have to really pick and choose where Kuminga can get in. And I expect them to at least show what their idea is for what Kuminga will be on this team as the big go-to the basket scorer that isn't that good of a shooter or passer or, for that matter, dribbler. but put him in a straight line and he can wrecking ball to the hoop. So it'll be a chaotic, I think, opening night for the Warriors. And on the other side, the Lakers, obviously everyone is going to be looking at the man of the hour, the man of the summer, the Men's Health magazine cover, Luka Doncic. Obviously, he had a pretty intentionally public summer. I do think so. And he's going to have a lot to prove early in the season. He has changed his body completely. He has went on this pseudo press tour, Men's Health magazine, like I mentioned, played in Eurobasket, looks to be healthy, played in preseason. Unfortunately, LeBron won't be there, but that just gives him all the more opportunity to show that he is back to being a great shape player. And other than that, what do you really expect out of the Lakers? I guess some clarity on the Ayton situation and whether he's going to be a solid contributor in the way that we think he can be. Whether that's like 15-9 or 12-8, we don't really know. We assume it's going to be closer to like a 15-9, because whether you like it or not, he was averaging nearly like 20-12 or something with the Suns. So there's not really a question of his skill. It's more a question of his effort and his consistency in executing the way that he should be. And playing next to Luka, theoretically, of course, should give him an easy job. We saw Lively, we saw Gafford both excel next to Luka, although I think Lively would have been good anywhere. So you can only assume that with a proper point guard, which he has not had since Chris Paul has left, that Ayton can progress to being a better player again. Would I love to see him average like a really good 19-12? Of course. Are we going to see him average a 19-12? I very highly doubt it. Would that be, is that out of the realm of possibility? No, of course it's not. We've seen him do it. He's in a good situation. They've got guards, they've got wings, they've got shooters to an extent. And he has the personnel around him to be able to do that. Now, next question for me, and next expectation for me, I expect Marcus Smart to start. I do expect Marcus Smart to start. Marcus Smart to start. I do expect Marcus Smart to start. Try saying that 10 times fast. Are you trying? Alright. So, if we're saying Luka, Ayton, and Austin Reeves are guaranteed starters like they should be and like they will be, then we assume Rui Hachimura is going to start, and then maybe LeBron in that spot. But LeBron not going to be there for a little bit, so I assume they'll need a wing. Now, I would not be surprised if they start Jake LaRavia. That might be surprising to some people. I don't think it would be a surprise. He proved early in Memphis that he can be a good player. Now, I feel like part of the reason that Taylor Jenkins was fired might have been because of his unwillingness to not play Jake LaRavia. But he was good at a time, and he sort of fell off for a little bit, and now he's back with the Lakers, and he's gonna get easy shots. I don't like saying it, but people call him sneaky athletic, of course. And he's a big body. He's pretty big. I would guess 6'7", like 230 for Jake LaRavia. Let me look it up. 6'7", 230. They have him listed at 6'8", 235 on Basketball Reference. And we're going to say on NBA.com, they have him at 6'7", 235. Big guy, huge guy for the wing. That Marcus Smart just can't provide that size. Although, of course, Marcus Smart is only a few years removed from being an NBA all-defensive player and defensive player of the year. So it's not too far-fetched that he would be able to compensate with his size. Compensate for his size with immense defensive skill. Last year, LaRavia shot 42.3% from three, albeit on low volume and only in 20 minutes per game. But he's a pretty solid ball mover. He can move the ball, and maybe that was just a product of Memphis's offense last year, being this kind of everybody gets the ball blueprint. But I think if any team is going to need his shooting and size, it's going to be the Lakers. And if we look at their depth chart, their reservoir of big wings is pretty limited. They can't really compensate for their lack of wing depth with anything but health. I mean, you can assume that Jared Vanderbilt will be healthy this year. Well, I wouldn't assume it, but you can. And his shot looks a little better, supposedly. I heard in camp. He's only 26 years old. He's definitely got some juice in the tank. Great defender, just cannot stay healthy. He had one outlier, well, like two outlier healthy years. And since then, it's just been injury. And a disappointing lack of jump shot development. But according to this, same height as Jake LaRavia, so though he plays bigger. So some semblance of roster construction and, more importantly, rotation clarity would be basically what I'm expecting from the Lakers here. More so in the forwards than the guards, because even if Marcus Smart doesn't start, I think he's going to be the backup or a backup guard regardless. And more importantly, is Dalton Knecht an NBA player? Because certainly seems like he's not. And that might be a little bit harsh. He's only in his year 2, but he is already 24. And in preseason, he just couldn't do it. And I mean, not even just in preseason, but also in summer league, it just wasn't quite there. And that might have something to do with the lack of confidence that the Lakers had in him. I mean, he did score 37 in an actual NBA game. He scored double digits a ton, but then he pseudo got traded, and then he came back, and this might have been awkward. But I think the real problem with Dalton Knecht, and when you look at his stats and the way that he's being used in the NBA versus in college, you can really tell the difference in his scoring output, because he's a shooter in the NBA. He's at the NBA level, he's being used as a shooter, and at the college level, he was used as a scorer. He took only 93 threes in college. He made 93 threes in college, his final year in college, which is a little less than 3 a game. But he made 264 field goals, so less than half of his shots were threes. Whereas at the NBA level, about half his shots well, not even, more than half his shots are three-pointers, which is just a tough thing to adapt to as a guy that was shooting off the dribble and handling the ball and being just a pure scorer, to come in and be more of a spot-up shooter. It's a hard thing to adapt to as a young NBA player. So, what am I looking at for the Lakers? Broadly, lineup construction and who is actually going to be playing what position, because they've got a lot of questions there, especially until LeBron gets back. I'm looking at Luka, I'm looking at Ayton, and then for the Warriors, mostly just big man lineup. Who's going to start at the 2? Anything other than that is extra. I think Curry's going to have a great game. He had a really good preseason game not that long ago. So I can only assume that is going to continue against a team that might not have a rock-solid defense like the Lakers. Again, on Thunder, I think Thunder are going to come out strong. I think they're going to want to defend themselves as both title contenders, title winners, and Shea as an MVP, and prove to everyone that it's not a fluke, and that they still have it, even though they're coming off of the least rest in the NBA. And then, last but not least, of course, the Rockets. Who's going to play at their guard? Who's going to be their big man rotation? And how good does Kevin Durant fit in this team? Thank you for tuning into the Shoot Podcast today. Of course, the NBA is back today, and I am super excited to cover it this year. Leave a like if you like, subscribe. See ya!